Dr. Sarah Chen wiped sweat from her face as she looked at the readings on her screen. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The metal detector was going crazy, beeping so fast it sounded like a broken alarm clock. "Rodriguez, come look at this," she called to the mission commander. "The scanner is picking up something massive down there." Commander Miguel Rodriguez walked over to her station inside the lunar base. His heavy boots made soft thuds on the metal floor. Outside the small windows, the gray surface of the moon stretched forever under the black sky. "How massive are we talking about?" Rodriguez asked. He had been leading moon missions for 10 years and he had never seen readings like this. 2 kilometers long. "Maybe more," Chen said. She pushed her glasses up her nose and pointed at the screen, and it's 50 meters down, buried under all that rock and dust. The third member of their team, Dr. James Reeves, looked up from his equipment. He was the engineer, the one who fixed things when they broke. "That can't be right. There's nothing that big on the moon. We would have seen it from space." Chen shook her head. "The readings don't lie. There's a structure down there, made of metal. And Jim, look at these numbers." She turned her screen so he could see. "This metal, it's not like anything we know." Reeves walked over and studied the data. His eyes got wide. "This is impossible. According to this, some of these elements shouldn't exist. They're too heavy to be stable. They should break apart in seconds." Rodriguez felt a cold feeling in his stomach. He had been in space long enough to know that impossible things usually meant trouble. Could it be natural? Some kind of weird rock formation? "No," Chen said firmly. "Look at the shape. It's perfectly smooth on the sides, long and narrow, like a cigar, but huge. This thing was built by someone." The three of them stood in silence for a moment. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains. Soon it would be dark for 2 weeks. The moon's day and night each lasted 14 Earth days. "We need to dig," Rodriguez said finally. "We need to see what's down there." "That's a lot of digging," Reeves said. 50 meters through solid rock. It will take weeks." "Then we better get started," Rodriguez replied. He picked up the radio. "Houston, this is Lunar Base Alpha. We have a situation." The voice from Earth crackled through the speakers. "Copy, Alpha. What's your status?" Rodriguez looked at his team. "How do you tell Earth that you found something impossible?" "Houston, we've discovered a large artificial structure buried beneath our location. Requesting permission to begin excavation." There was a long pause. "Alpha, did you say artificial structure?" "Confirmed, Houston. 2 kilometers in length. Unknown composition. We believe it may be not human in origin." Another long pause. Rodriguez could picture the chaos in mission control. People running around, making phone calls, trying to figure out what to do. "Alpha, you are authorized to proceed with caution. Document everything. And Alpha, be very careful down there." For the next 3 weeks, they worked around the clock. The drilling was slow and difficult. The moon's gravity was weak, so their equipment didn't work the same way it did on Earth. But slowly, meter by meter, they dug down toward the mysterious object. Chen spent most of her time analyzing the rock samples they brought up. The deeper they went, the stranger things got. The rock around the object had been changed somehow. It was harder than it should be, like it had been heated to incredible temperatures. "Whatever this thing is," she told the others, "it's been here for a very long time. Millions of years, maybe more." Reeves was worried about their equipment. The drill bits kept wearing out faster than they should. "It's like the rock doesn't want us to dig through it," he joked. But he wasn't really joking. On day 22, they finally broke through. The drill suddenly dropped half a meter, and they knew they had found empty space. Rodriguez suited up and went down the shaft first. His headlamp cut through the darkness as he descended on a cable. "I can see it," he reported over the radio. His voice was shaking a little. "There's definitely something here. It's big." When he reached the bottom of the shaft, Rodriguez found himself standing on the hull of something that was clearly a spacecraft. The metal was dark gray and perfectly smooth. It didn't look like any metal he had ever seen. When he touched it, With his gloved hand, it felt warm, even though it should have been frozen in the cold of space. "Chen Reeves, you need to get down here," he said. "And bring the cutting tools. We're going inside." It took them another day to cut through the hull. The metal was incredibly tough. Their best laser cutters barely scratched it. Finally, they managed to make a hole big enough to crawl through. Rodriguez went first again. He squeezed through the hole and found himself in a corridor. His headlamp showed walls that curved away into darkness. The corridor was tall enough for him to stand up straight, but it felt wrong somehow. "The proportions are strange," he reported. "It's like it was built for people who are taller and thinner than humans." Chen and Reeves joined him inside the alien ship. They stood close together, their lights making strange shadows on the walls. "Look at this," Chen said. She was examining the walls with a small scanner. "The metal isn't just tough, it's doing something impossible. According to my readings, this corridor is longer on the inside than it should be based on the external measurements." Reeves laughed nervously. "That's not possible. Things can't be bigger on the inside." But as they walked deeper into the ship, it became clear that impossible things were normal here. Corridors that should have led to dead ends instead opened into vast chambers. Rooms that looked small from the entrance turned out to be enormous once you stepped inside. "This is hurting my brain," Reeves said. He was trying to map the ship's layout, but his drawings didn't make sense. Lines that should be straight curved back on themselves. Rooms connected to other rooms in ways that defied geometry. The strangest discovery came when they found what looked like the ship's engine room. It was a massive space filled with machinery that hummed with power, even after millions of years. At the center was something that made Chen's breath catch in her throat. "Is that what I think it is?" she whispered. In the middle of the room, suspended in a clear crystal container, was a tiny black sphere. It was perfectly round and so dark it seemed to swallow light. Around it, space itself seemed to bend and twist. "It's a black hole," Chen said in amazement. They somehow contained a black hole the size of a marble and used it as a power source. But Reeves was shaking his head as he took readings. "That can't be right. A black hole that small would evaporate instantly. And even if it didn't, the gravity would tear this ship apart." "Then explain this," Chen said, pointing at her instruments. "Infinite power output. Zero gravitational distortion. This thing is breaking every law of physics we know." Rodriguez keyed his radio. "Houston, we're going to need some help here. We're looking at technology that, well, it doesn't make sense. We need every physicist on Earth to start working on this." As they explored more of the ship, they found control rooms filled with displays showing star charts that hurt to look at. The maps showed routes through space that folded back on themselves, shortcuts through dimensions that shouldn't exist. "Whoever built this," Chen said, "they didn't just have better technology than us. They understood the universe in a completely different way." That night, back at their base, the three of them sat in silence, trying to process what they had found. Outside, the long lunar night continued, but inside the buried ship, impossible machines hummed with power, waiting for someone to understand their secrets. Rodriguez looked at his teammates. "Tomorrow we go back, and we figure out how this thing works." None of them could sleep. They had found something that would change everything humans thought they knew about the universe. The question was, were they ready for those changes? The next morning, if you could call it morning on a world with no sun, the team returned to the alien ship. Chen had barely slept. Her mind kept racing with questions about what they had found. How could a ship be bigger inside than outside? How could a black hole be contained without gravity? "I've been thinking about this all night," she told Rodriguez as they descended into the shaft. "What if these aliens didn't just have different technology? What if they came from somewhere with different rules?" Rodriguez secured his safety line and checked his equipment. "Different rules?" "Different physics," Chen explained. "What if they evolved in a place where the laws of nature work differently, where space and time bend in ways we can't imagine?" Reeves joined them at the bottom of the shaft. He was carrying a bag full of new instruments, tools designed to measure things Earth science barely understood. "My daughter called last night," he said. She's working on her physics PhD at MIT. I told her about what we found. You told her? Rodriguez looked worried. Jim, this mission is classified. I know. But she's brilliant with theoretical stuff, way smarter than me. Reeves held up a tablet showing complex mathematical equations. She thinks she knows what we're dealing with. They crawled through the hole they had cut in the ship's hull. Inside, the strange corridors waited for them, defying logic with every step. Chen turned on her recorder. Day 24, she spoke into the device. Continuing exploration of unknown vessel. Today we're focusing on the ship's computer systems. They had found what looked like a control room the day before. It was filled with surfaces that might have been screens, covered in symbols that looked like no writing system on Earth. The symbols seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. Okay, Reeves said, setting up his equipment. According to my daughter's theories, if these aliens came from a different kind of space-time, their computers might work on completely different principles. Chen approached one of the dark surfaces. When she got close, it suddenly lit up with swirling patterns of light. It's responding to my presence, she said, like it knows I'm here. The patterns on the screen were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. They seemed to show mathematical relationships, but the math didn't make sense. Equations where 1 + 1 = 3. Geometric shapes with more sides than should be possible. This is giving me a headache, Rodriguez said, looking at the display. It's like trying to read a book written in colors. Reeves was taking readings with his instruments. The energy patterns are incredible. This computer is processing information in quantum superposition states. It's like it's running every possible calculation at the same time. Chen reached out to touch the screen. The moment her gloved finger made contact, the patterns exploded into new configurations. Suddenly, she could understand fragments of what she was seeing. It's a star map, she said excitedly. But not like any star map we know. Look at this. She pointed to a section of the display. These aren't just showing where stars are. They're showing how to get between them by folding space. The map showed routes that curved through dimensions humans didn't have names for. Paths that connected distant galaxies as if they were next-door neighbors. Some of the routes seemed to go backward through time. This is impossible, Rodriguez said. You can't travel to the past. Not in our universe, Reeves said, studying his daughter's notes. But what if their universe had different rules about causality? What if effect could come before cause? They spent hours trying to understand the alien navigation system. The more they learned, the more impossible it seemed. The aliens had mapped pathways through reality itself, treating space and time like a fabric that could be folded, twisted, and cut. Chen found another control surface and activated it. This one showed something different. I think this is their propulsion system, she said. And guys, I don't think this ship ever moved through space the normal way. The display showed the ship existing in multiple locations at once. Instead of traveling from point A to point B, it simply stopped existing at point A and started existing at point B. No journey in between, no time elapsed. They didn't travel through space, Chen realized. They traveled through possibility. They made themselves possible somewhere else. Reeves was getting more excited as he took readings. The power requirements for something like this would be enormous. That's why they need the contained black hole. They're not just powering a ship, they're powering a machine that rewrites reality. But Rodriguez was getting worried. If they could do all this, if they were so advanced, why is their ship buried? On our moon? What happened to them? They decided to explore deeper into the ship. Using Chen's growing understanding of the alien interface, they managed to activate what looked like an elevator. It carried them down into levels that shouldn't have existed, given the ship's external size. We're now 300 meters below the ship's hull, Reeves reported, checking his position tracker. But that's impossible. The ship is only 2 kilometers long. The elevator stopped and the doors opened to reveal the most impossible sight yet. They stood at the edge of a vast chamber that stretched beyond the reach of their lights. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them. The walls curved away like they were inside a sphere the size of a city. This room is bigger than the entire ship, Chen whispered. In the center of the enormous space stood something that hurt to look at. It was a pillar of crystalline material that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could process. Around it, machinery hummed, with purpose tending to whatever the crystal contained. "It's beautiful," Chen said, "and terrifying." As they approached the crystal pillar, their instruments went crazy. The readings made no sense. Energy patterns that violated conservation laws, matter that existed in multiple states simultaneously, time that flowed in loops and spirals instead of a straight line. "This isn't just their computer core," Reeves said, studying the impossible data. "I think this is how they think. Their consciousness isn't biological like ours. It's built into the structure of space-time itself." Chen touched the crystal surface with her gloved hand. Immediately, images flooded her mind. Not pictures, but pure understanding. She saw the aliens' home universe, a place where mathematics were alive, where equations had consciousness, where logic was the fundamental force that held reality together. She saw their cities, built from crystallized thought, their transportation, which moved by convincing the universe that distance was an illusion, their art, which was made from impossible geometries that sang with mathematical beauty. But she also saw their limitation. Everything they did had to follow perfect logic. Every action had to be mathematically provable. They had achieved incredible things, but they were trapped by their own perfection. They were prisoners of logic, Chen said, pulling her hand away from the crystal. They could do amazing things, but only if those things made perfect mathematical sense. Rodriguez was studying the alien writing on the walls around the crystal. With Chen's new understanding, some of the symbols were starting to make sense. To him, too. "Look at this," he said. "I think this is some kind of record, a ship's log." He pointed to a sequence of symbols. "It's telling a story about why they came here." The log revealed something chilling. The aliens hadn't come to the moon by choice. They had been running away from something so terrible that they had abandoned their perfect logical universe to hide in the chaotic, imperfect reality that humans called home. They were refugees, Chen said. But refugees from what? The answer was in the deepest part of the log, written in symbols that pulsed with fear. Even across millions of years and vast differences in biology, terror was universal. The aliens had been fleeing from entities of pure entropy, beings that consumed order itself. Creatures that ate logic and mathematics, leaving only chaos behind. And now, Chen realized with growing horror, the activation of this ship might have sent a signal across the dimensions. A signal that said, "The refugees are here." The entropy beings might be coming to finish what they had started. Back at their lunar base, Chen couldn't stop thinking about what they had discovered. The alien ship's log had shown creatures of pure entropy hunting the mathematical beings across dimensions. But there was something else bothering her. Something she couldn't put her finger on. "Jim," she said to Reeves as he worked on his equipment. "Something strange happened when I touched that crystal." Reeves looked up from his tool bench. "Strange how?" "The alien consciousness tried to communicate with me, but it seemed surprised, like it didn't expect to be able to connect with a human mind." Rodriguez joined their conversation. "Maybe they thought humans were too primitive to understand their technology." "No, that's not it." Chen shook her head. "It was more like they thought our minds worked too differently. But here's the weird part. That difference seemed to make the connection stronger, not weaker. The next day they returned to the ship with a new plan. Chen had suggested they try to activate more of the alien systems. If the entropy beings were really coming, they needed to understand everything about their technology. In the ship's main control room, Reeves was trying to figure out how the alien interfaces worked. He had been pressing symbols and touching surfaces for an hour with no success. "This is frustrating," he muttered. "Nothing makes sense. Why would you put the power controls next to the navigation system? And why does this button seem to do 3 different things depending on when you press it?" Chen was working at another station, trying to access what looked like the ship's memory banks. She was having similar problems. "Their whole system is designed around pure logic," she said. Every action has to follow from a mathematical proof. You can't just try something to see if it works. Rodriguez was studying the alien writing on the walls. With practice, he was getting better at reading their symbols. According to this, the ship requires what they call perfect operational clarity before it will respond to commands. Perfect operational clarity, Reeves repeated. What does that even mean? I think it means you have to know exactly what you want to do and exactly why you want to do it, with mathematical certainty, before the ship will let you do it, Chen explained. Reeves threw his hands up in frustration. That's insane. How do you discover anything new if you already have to know everything before you start? At that moment, something unexpected happened. The control surface Reeves had been working on suddenly lit up with activity. Symbols began moving across the display, and they could hear machinery humming to life somewhere in the ship. What did you do? Rodriguez asked. Nothing. I just got frustrated and... Reeves stopped talking. Wait, when I got frustrated, that's when it activated. Chen ran over to check the readings. Jim, you just activated the ship's repair systems. Look, it's diagnosing problems throughout the vessel and fixing them automatically. But I didn't know how to do that, Reeves protested. I was just annoyed that nothing was working. Chen stared at him with growing excitement. That's exactly the point. You didn't think logically about what you wanted. You just felt frustrated and wanted things to work better, and somehow the ship understood that. They spent the next several hours experimenting with this discovery. It seemed that the alien ship systems responded to human emotions and intuitions in ways they had never responded to their original builders. When Rodriguez felt curious about something, information displays would activate to show him what he wanted to know. When Chen felt worried about the ship's structural integrity, diagnostic systems would run automatically. When Reeves felt like something should work differently, the ship would actually reconfigure itself to match his expectations. This is incredible, Chen said, recording her observations. The aliens built this ship to respond to pure logical commands. But human minds don't work that way. We think in associations, emotions, intuitions, things that don't make logical sense. And somehow, Rodriguez added, that's making us better at using their technology than they were. The breakthrough came when they reached the ship's main engine control room. The aliens had filled this space with safety systems and logical locks. According to the ship's manual, starting the engines required solving a series of mathematical proofs that could take days to complete. Reeves looked at the incredibly complex control system and shook his head. There has to be a simpler way to do this. He walked up to what looked like the main power control and simply pushed it. Nothing happened. Okay, he said to himself. If I were designing this, I would put the start button somewhere obvious. He looked around the room and spotted a simple red crystal sitting on a pedestal in the corner. It looked exactly like an on-off switch. He walked over and pressed it. The entire ship came to life. Lights activated throughout the vessel. Gravity generators hummed to power, giving them normal weight for the first time since entering the ship. The air recycling system started up, filling the corridors with breathable atmosphere. How did you know to do that? Chen asked in amazement. I didn't, Reeves admitted. It just felt right. Like when you're looking for a light switch in the dark. You just know where it should be. Rodriguez was checking his instruments. Jim, you just activated systems that the aliens' own manuals say should be impossible to start without a team of experts working for weeks. Over the following days, they made discovery after discovery. The ship's computer systems, designed to require perfect logical input, worked much better when humans approached them with creative leaps and intuitive guesses. The navigation system, which had been locked behind mathematical barriers the aliens themselves found difficult to solve, opened up completely when Chen approached it with artistic thinking, treating the star maps like a beautiful painting rather than a technical diagram. The ship's repair systems, which had been dormant for millions of years, began fixing damage throughout the vessel once Reeves started talking to them like they were old friends who just needed encouragement. We're not just better at using this technology, Chen realized during one of their daily debriefings. We're better at it because we're not logical. The aliens built everything to respond to perfect rational thinking, but our messy, emotional, intuitive way of thinking actually works better with their systems. But why? Rodriguez asked. Why would illogical thinking work better with logical machines? Chen had been working on this puzzle. I think it's because their machines aren't really logical. They're trying to be logical, but they're operating in our universe now, where logic has limits. Pure mathematical thinking can't handle paradoxes and contradictions. But human thinking is built for dealing with things that don't make sense. She showed them her analysis of the ship's core systems. Look at this. Their contained black hole shouldn't exist according to our physics. Their navigation system maps impossible routes through space-time. Their computer core processes information in ways that violate causality. So their technology is actually illogical? Reeves asked. Not illogical, Chen corrected. It operates on a different kind of logic, a logic that includes paradoxes and impossibilities as normal parts of the system. The aliens couldn't fully use their own technology because they were trapped by traditional logical thinking. Rodriguez was beginning to understand. But humans aren't trapped that way. We're used to things not making perfect sense. We deal with contradictions and paradoxes every day. Exactly, Chen said. We live in a universe where quantum mechanics says particles can be in two places at once, where relativity says time passes differently for different observers, where the universe itself is expanding into nothing. We're already comfortable with impossible things. That night, as they prepared to return to their base, Rodriguez made a disturbing discovery in the ship's communication systems. The vessel had been sending out a signal ever since they had activated it, a signal that was broadcasting their location across multiple dimensions. Chen, he called urgently, I think we may have made a mistake. This signal, it's not just going to our universe. It's going everywhere, to places where the entropy beings might be waiting. Chen checked the readings and felt her heart sink. The signal was indeed spreading across dimensional boundaries, announcing that the refugee ship had been found and reactivated. How long do we have? She asked. Rodriguez consulted the alien star charts. Based on their navigation records, 6 months, maybe less. The entropy beings were coming to finish their ancient hunt, and Earth, with all its chaotic, illogical, beautifully human thinking, was about to become a battlefield. The emergency meeting at Mission Control in Houston was unlike anything in the history of space exploration. Scientists, military officials, and world leaders gathered around screens showing the impossible alien technology. Chen, Rodriguez, and Reeves participated by video link from their lunar base. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, said General Morrison, head of Space Command. You've discovered a refugee ship from another dimension, and now you're telling us that activating it has sent a signal to hostile entities that want to destroy our universe? Chen looked tired. She had been working for 72 hours straight, trying to understand more of the alien ship's records. That's correct, General. The ship's logs are very clear about what happened to their civilization. Dr. Elizabeth Warren from NASA spoke up. Dr. Chen, can you explain these entropy beings in simpler terms? Chen pulled up the alien records they had managed to translate. Imagine creatures made of pure mathematical destruction. They don't just kill living things. They destroy the very concepts that hold reality together. Order, logic, cause, and effect. They consume it all. But how is that possible? Asked Dr. Yamamoto from the Tokyo Institute of Technology, joining by video from Japan. Rodriguez took over the explanation. From what we can understand, these beings evolved in regions of space-time where entropy was the dominant force. They feed on organization and structure. When they encounter a universe like ours with its physical laws and mathematical relationships, they see it as food. The alien ship's records painted a terrifying picture. The mathematical beings who had built the vessel had once lived in a universe of perfect order. Their cities were made of living equations. Their art was composed of beautiful geometric relationships. Their very thoughts were crystallized mathematics. Then the entropy beings had arrived. The invasion wasn't violent in any way we would recognize, Chen explained, reading from the translated logs. The entropy creatures simply existed in the same space as the mathematical beings, and order began to break down. Physical laws became suggestions. Mathematical proofs stopped working. Logic itself started to decay. Reeves shared the most disturbing part. The mathematical beings tried to fight back using their most advanced weapons, energy beams based on perfect geometric principles, defensive shields made of crystallized spacetime. Nothing worked. You can't fight entropy with order. It's like trying to fight darkness with more darkness. So they ran, Rodriguez continued. They built these escape ships and fled to our universe, hoping that our reality's chaos and imperfection would hide them from the entropy beings. General Morrison looked grim. And it worked until we activated their ship. The activation sent out a signal across multiple dimensions, Chen confirmed. It's like lighting a campfire in the woods. The entropy beings now know exactly where to find us. Dr. Sarah Kim from MIT, Reeves's daughter, who had been consulting on the project, joined the video conference. I've been analyzing the mathematical principles behind these beings. The really terrifying thing is that they don't hate us or want to hurt us specifically. To them, we're just another form of order that needs to be consumed. How long do we have? Asked the president's science advisor. Chen consulted the alien navigation charts. The ship's computers show several possible arrival routes. The fastest path would bring them here in about 6 months. The longest might give us 2 years. But we should assume the worst case, Rodriguez added. 6 months to prepare for entities that destroyed a civilization far more advanced than ours. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Finally, General Morrison spoke. What are our options? Can we fight them? Chen shook her head. Every weapon the mathematical beings had was based on order and logic. The entropy creatures absorbed those weapons and became stronger. Our weapons are based on the same principles: controlled explosions, directed energy, organized destruction. None of it will work. What about running? Suggested someone from the European Space Agency. Could we evacuate Earth? Where would we go? Reeves asked. The entropy beings can travel between dimensions. There's nowhere to hide that they can't eventually find. Dr. Kim cleared her throat. Actually, I've been thinking about this problem from a different angle. What if the reason the mathematical beings failed wasn't because they were too weak, but because they approached the problem in the wrong way? What do you mean? Her father asked. The aliens tried to fight entropy with perfect order. But what if that's exactly backwards? What if the way to fight entropy isn't with more order, but with controlled chaos? Chen's eyes lit up with understanding. You're thinking about what we discovered in the ship, how human illogical thinking worked better with their technology than their own logical approach. Exactly, Dr. Kim said excitedly. The aliens built their technology to respond to perfect mathematical input, but it actually worked better when humans approached it with intuition, emotion, and creative leaps. Things that don't make logical sense. Rodriguez was beginning to see where this was going. You're suggesting we don't fight the entropy beings with order. We fight them with human chaos. But how would that work? General Morrison asked. You can't just be random and expect to win a war. Chen had been studying the alien ship's reality manipulation technology. Actually, we might be able to do exactly that. The ship's systems can alter the fundamental properties of spacetime. What if we could create zones where physical laws become flexible? Flexible how? Asked Dr. Warren. Reeves was getting excited as he understood the plan. Regions where cause and effect become optional, where 2 + 2 might equal fish instead of 4, where success depends on belief and determination rather than mathematics. You're talking about weaponizing irrationality itself, said Dr. Yamamoto with amazement. Think about it, Chen continued. Entropy beings are creatures of pure mathematical logic, even if it's destructive logic. They consume order, but what if they encountered something that wasn't ordered or disordered, but something completely outside those categories? Dr. Kim pulled up complex equations on her screen. I've been working on the theoretical framework. If we could create fields where reality responds to human will rather than physical law, the entropy beings might not be able to function. Because they'd be trying to consume order that keeps changing into something else, Rodriguez realized. Like trying to eat something that turns into music just as you bite it. General Morrison looked skeptical. This sounds like science fiction. How would we actually implement something like this? Chen gestured toward the alien ship. The technology is already here. The mathematical beings built reality manipulation systems that they couldn't fully control because they were too logical. But humans aren't limited by logical thinking. We could potentially turn their own technology into something they never imagined. A chaos generator, Reeves said with growing enthusiasm. A system that makes the universe run on human rules instead of mathematical ones. But would it work? Asked the president's advisor. Chen looked at her teammates, then back at the screen full of world leaders and scientists. I don't know, but I do know that logical approaches failed against these beings before. The only advantage we have is that we're not logical. We're human. Dr. Kim nodded agreement. Sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem is to refuse to accept that it's impossible. That's very human thinking. So our plan is to make the universe weird enough that ancient cosmic entities can't handle it? General Morrison asked. That's about the size of it, Rodriguez confirmed. General Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled grimly. You know what? I've seen enough impossible things in my career to know that crazy plans sometimes work better than sensible uns. What do you need from us? Chen felt hope for the first time since they'd discovered the entropy beings were coming. We need every physicist, engineer, and creative thinker on Earth to start working on this. We're going to turn human stubbornness and refusal to accept defeat into weapons of war. Outside the lunar base windows, the stars looked different now, that Chen knew what was coming from the spaces between them. But for the first time she thought humanity might have a chance, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they were the most beautifully, chaotically, impossibly human. 6 months later, Earth looked like a planet preparing for the strangest war in history. Instead of building bigger weapons or stronger shields, humanity had spent half a year learning how to think differently about reality itself. Chen stood. In the command center they had built around the alien ship on the moon. The chamber was filled with the most brilliant minds from every nation on Earth, but also artists, musicians, children, and anyone else who could think in ways that defied logic. Status report, she called out. Dr. Kim, now the project's head of theoretical chaos, looked up from her instruments. The reality distortion field generators are online across all 7 continents. We've got chaos zones active in major population centers and backup systems ready in case the primary network fails. Rodriguez monitored the alien detection systems they had built using the ship's technology. Long-range sensors show the entropy beings are still 3 days out, but their approach is strange. They're not coming directly through space. They're tunneling through probability itself. Reeves wiped sweat from his forehead as he worked on the final calibrations of their most important system. The master chaos generator is ready, but I have to warn everyone again. Once we activate this thing, the laws of physics become optional in a 1,000-kilometer radius around Earth. General Morrison, now overall commander of humanity's defense, looked around the room. People, I want to be clear about what we're attempting. We're going to make our local universe run on hope, determination, and pure human stubbornness instead of mathematical laws. This has never been tried before. Actually, said Dr. Petrov from Moscow State University, humans have been defying logical expectations for thousands of years. We're just doing it on a larger scale now. Chen activated the communication system that connected them to every major city on Earth. All stations, this is Lunar Command. Entropy contact in 72 hours. Begin final preparations. Around the world, humanity prepared for war in the most human way possible. In New York, jazz musicians prepared to play concerts that would make mathematics dance to syncopated rhythms. In Tokyo, engineers had built machines that worked because people believed they would work, not because they followed physical laws. In London, children drew pictures of impossible things that the reality generators would make real. The plan was beautifully insane. Instead of trying to destroy the entropy beings, they would create local reality zones where entropy beings simply couldn't exist, not because they were blocked, but because the very concepts they were based on would become meaningless. Incoming transmission from the Antarctic station, reported Lieutenant Chang. Dr. Martinez says their reality field is stable. Gravity is now responding to musical harmony instead of mass. Confirmed from the Sahara installation, added another operator. Solar panels are generating power from optimism instead of sunlight. Chen smiled despite the approaching danger. Only humans would try to save the universe by making it more ridiculous. 2 days later, the entropy beings arrived. The first sign was the failure of logical systems across the solar system. Automated satellites stopped working because their programming required cause and effect relationships. Mathematical models began producing results like purple and the sound of Tuesday, but humanity's chaos generators were ready. Activate the reality distortion field, Chen ordered. All stations, begin Operation Controlled Madness. Around Earth, the impossible became routine. In the chaos zones, the laws of physics became suggestions that reality followed only when it felt like it. Spaceships began running on determination and coffee instead of rocket fuel. Weapon systems worked because their operators really wanted them to work, not because of engineering principles. The entropy beings found themselves in an environment they had never encountered before. They tried to consume the order of human cities, but the order kept changing into something else. Skyscrapers that should have collapsed according to mathematical stress calculations stayed standing because the people inside them refused to fall down. Military equipment that should have failed worked perfectly because the soldiers using it believed it would work. They're confused, Rodriguez reported, watching the alien detection systems. The entropy beings are trying to locate sources of order to consume, but they can't lock onto anything. Every time they find something logical, it turns into something that makes no sense. Chen watched the displays showing the battle taking place in Earth's atmosphere. It wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. The entropy beings weren't shooting weapons or destroying cities. They were simply trying to exist in the same space as human civilization, but human civilization kept refusing to make sense. Look at this, called Dr. Kim. The entropy readings from Sector 7. The beings are trying to consume the logical structure of the internet, but what? Well, it's the internet. It was never logical to begin with. They're trying to destroy something that's already chaotic. Similar reports came in from around the world. The entropy beings attacked power grids that ran on hope. They tried to collapse economic systems that were already held together by confidence and wishful thinking. They attempted to destroy transportation, networks that worked because millions of people decided they should work. It's working, Chen said with amazement. They can't destroy human civilization because human civilization was never entirely logical in the first place. But the entropy beings were learning. After 12 hours of confusion, they began to adapt. They stopped trying to consume existing order and started trying to impose their own form of mathematical destruction. Problem, announced Rodriguez. They're not trying to destroy our chaos anymore. They're trying to replace it with their own kind of chaos. Destructive chaos. The tide of battle shifted. Entropy fields began spreading from the being's location, turning vibrant chaos zones into dead regions where nothing could exist. The beings had learned to fight human illogic with alien illogic. All stations, implement Protocol Impossible, Chen ordered. This was the plan they had hoped they wouldn't need to use. Instead of fighting the entropy being's destructive chaos with constructive chaos, they were going to overwhelm it with pure human stubbornness. Activating the belief engine, Reeves announced. Around the world, 8 billion humans began the most important act of faith in history. They refused to believe the entropy beings could win, not because they had logical reasons for optimism, but because humans had a long history of winning impossible fights through sheer determination. The effect was immediate and dramatic. In the zones where entropy beings had begun to impose mathematical destruction, reality itself rebelled. The universe, influenced by billions of human minds all insisting that good should triumph over evil, began to make it so. Entropy beings found themselves unable to destroy cities full of people who simply refused to be destroyed. Military units that should have been wiped out by superior alien mathematics kept fighting because they had orders to protect their homes. Scientists whose equipment should have failed by any logical measure kept working because they were too busy to notice that their experiments were impossible. The entropy beings are retreating, Rodriguez said in disbelief. On the displays, the alien entities were indeed pulling back from Earth, but they weren't fleeing in fear. They were withdrawing in something like admiration. Chen accessed the alien ship's communication systems and found something unexpected, a message from the entropy beings themselves. The message was complex, transmitted in mathematical concepts that hurt to think about. But the basic meaning was clear. We have never encountered organized chaos before. This is interesting. We withdraw to study this phenomenon. Perhaps destruction and creation are not opposites, but partners. They're leaving, Chen announced, to the command center. They're not defeated, but they're curious. They want to understand what we've done here. General Morrison looked stunned. We won by making them think? We won by refusing to lose, Chen corrected, and by showing them something they had never seen before, chaos that creates instead of destroys. In the days that followed, as humanity slowly returned the laws of physics to their normal settings, scientists began to understand what they had accomplished. They hadn't just defeated the entropy beings, they had shown the universe itself a new way of existing. The reality generators remained active in modified form, creating zones around Earth where human creativity could bend the rules of physics. Artists could paint with gravity. Musicians could compose symphonies that made flowers grow. Engineers could build machines that worked on inspiration rather than fuel. Chen stood on the observation deck of the lunar base, looking down at Earth. The planet looked the same from this distance, but she knew it was fundamentally different now. Humanity had proven that consciousness and will could be just as fundamental as mathematics and physics. So what happens now? Rodriguez asked, joining her at the window. Now we explore, Chen replied. The entropy beings left us a gift. They opened pathways to other universes, other forms of reality. And they're not the only inhabitants of those strange places. Reeves appeared on the deck carrying a message tablet. We just received communications from 17 different alien civilizations. Turns out there are a lot of species out there who got tired of losing wars.